Strike Suit Zero is basically ace combat in space. Let's start off with the story. The story of Strike Suit Zero is basically, it starts off very Gundam Wing-esque, as in Earth and the Colonials are kind of at war against each other because they don't like each other that much. And then it gets kind of weird. By weird, I mean that you are this guy called Adams, and you have no memory whatsoever, and you go to fights after fights, and then eventually you get this thing called the Strike Suit, which an AI known as Control determines that you were the one who was meant to pilot this strike suit instead of someone who, let's say, is more experienced and actually knows what they're doing in a fight. Unlike Strike Suit Infinity, Strike Suit Zero is heavily story-based, so if you lose one of the main ships, such as the Mercury or the Aurora or the Arcadia, you have to start the mission over again from the last checkpoint because it's crucial to the story later on. I actually like this sort of failure state because it's not only to do with story, but it's also to do with gameplay and improves you as a player because you failed to prevent this ship from taking too many torpedoes to the face. However, there are also missions that have sub-objectives, such as make sure none of the torpedoes hit this ship and then you get a strike suit upgrade. And it's actually really good. I prefer that rather than like do this number of missions and then you finally get all the upgrades. Whoop-de-doo. It's like, get good. You can also unlock different kinds of strike suits, such as the Marauder, the Raptor, the Paladin, just like in Strike Suit Infinity. However, this is only for the Director's Cut, so if you actually want to get these sort of different kinds of strike suits without having to buy Strike Suit Infinity as well, get Strike Suit Zero Director's Cut. You also get a DLC campaign known as the Black Fleet, which is basically a simulation of what the Black Fleet was and how things came to be. Now let's talk about the gameplay. As I said in the beginning of the review, it is basically ace combat in space. However, it does have an interesting mechanic known as strike mode. Strike mode basically allows you to change from your fighter mode into a strike suit, where you are just a Gundam and you are just annihilating everyone, apart from frigates and carriers and cruisers, because, you know, they're kind of like giant ships. Now, you can't enter strike mode all that often. You need flux. Now, flux is generated over time, but very small and slowly, and also from just destroying anything around you, such as little tiny interceptors, fighters, parts of a cruiser, even a cruiser. That now would give you a lot. From the sounds of it, I'm making the gameplay sound extremely fun and so great. Well, funny story, it's not all that great all the time. There are times when you get swarmed by enemies and there's nothing you can do about it and you just end up losing the mission because you had too many enemies fire missiles at you and you couldn't avoid them all. There are also times when you're fighting against a cruiser. Now, you would think that your allies would help you out because, you know, there are other fighter pilots out there. You would think they also help you. They don't. So there are times when you literally lose all of your shield and armor because you're the only person attacking something. There are times when you actually see damage being done to a cruiser or another capital ship from other than yourself is in scripted events, and those missions don't happen all that often. And that is a fundamental flaw in the game's design. But I guess the argument you could put to this is in the initial Strike Suit Zero, there weren't any weak points that were located on these capital ships, while in Strike Suit Infinity, there were. And in Strike Suit Zero Director's Cuts, they finally put that mechanic into the game so that way you can locate and annihilate these cruisers and carriers all by yourself with no problem. But the only issue with that is you still have these flak turrets that will be shooting you in the face. So if you're in a timed mission, or a mission that's basically you have a short period of time to destroy these capital ships by yourself, you can't do it because of these flak turrets, so you can't get the upgrades. Overall, I really enjoy playing Strike Suit Zero Director's Cut. It is so much better than the original Strike Suit Zero, and it has mechanics from Infinity that just make it a lot better. And it also comes with the DLC, the Black Fleet, which is 5 missions, basically explaining to you how the Black Fleet was a thing. So I highly recommend you get the Director's Cut rather than the original.